money is one of the biggest obstacles that people have to overcome as far as taking the tension out of their neurology in order to heal their bodies.
Dr. Barre Lando is a physician, a kinesiologist, functional movement specialist, a master gardener, and founder of Alfa Vedic.
When you realize that you are not dependent on anything external, that's when you regain your health.
This is the crux of change. This is the fulcrum to which really liberation and freedom exists. It's this money piece. It's this true understanding of the nuances and the layers of money.
It's made us ignorant of who we are, where we come from, and our unlimited capacity. And that was the goal in the first place.
What we need is go back to our consciousness and how we co-create with each other. And that's really where we need to get out of, even with hard money, is moving into a means to interact with each other and engage through commerce, just through honor, through acceptance, and through understanding really where the true value of where the energy comes from, which is our thoughts, and how we can apply that qualitatively into a new currency system.
How does that change begin?
If you don't know how this stuff functions and works, you're going to be lost in your own ability to heal yourself. We are here to evolve. This is a classroom for us to learn and to evolve.
Hey, it's Josh, and can you do me a quick favor? Subscribe to the channel. It helps us, it helps you, and it helps bring this message to the algorithms so it can be served to more people that need it the most. So please click subscribe. It would mean the world to myself and my team. Now enjoy the podcast. Guys, welcome to the podcast. It's been a minute. I've been marinating on all kinds of subjects, just freedom, what it means to be a human, what it means to have food sovereignty, what it means to defend ourselves against what's going on the planet right now. We got some serious stuff to talk about. So welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
There's a bit of a delay. We're talking to each other through satellites. And so we'll be mindful of the satellite delay. You know, it's interesting. I think about the technology in which we're connecting, which is a double-edged sword. And based on where you live, you're both in NorCal. I spent some time in Garberville. I had some family there. Just an amazing area. Like probably the most pristine, tree-filled, crispy-aired place, Northern California. Dr. Barre, the journey to Northern California, it's so interesting because a lot of people migrated when there was the mass exodus of, let's just say, the woke mind virus. We went to Texas, but y'all stayed. Why did you stay?
Well, as we were saying before we started the show, Barre and I are, and his wife and family are he's multi-generational Californian. I was born and raised in California. And, you know, we talk a lot about sovereignty these days. I know it's a big buzzword in our communities. And part of that we felt was, the understanding that in order to really stand your ground and stand in your square, it's important to understand that the fiction of government really has no control over you, and that there is a resonance on the land you're born in. And it has to do with, a lot of things, spiritual, things that are tapping into the land. And so we felt called to stay here. And I don't like to say fight for California, but to live in California and be representative of what a real Californian is. Yes, we did go to the tip-top corner of the state to make it as easy as possible, because there's no way I could still be in SoCal. I evacuated my family out of Redondo Beach, California, actually, in 2016. I felt the call. So I pulled my family out and we went up here to the mountains of, we're really on the border of California and Oregon in a very remote place. And it was actually, we moved up here, Josh, the day Trump was elected, funny enough. And so it was a pretty wild time, November 2016. And this was like big Trump town up here. And so it's very red, it's very agrarian. People are very common sense and when it comes to their approach to life. And that was very attractive to us. And with what we know about law and standing on our square, we don't have the fear of government. So it's really more about resonance with this beautiful sacred land of California. And we wanted to stay here and enjoy it because it is really one of the most beautiful places in the world. And that's why they've targeted it the way they have.
I can feel that. I miss California. I really do. There's an energy there of creation. You've got snow, desert, ocean, valley, mountains. I mean, it's just a smorgasbord for the nervous system and healing and just contrast therapy. And I really do miss it. And, when we were called out to Austin, it was because I and my family were in search of freedom. And so I totally and respectfully congratulate both of you for staying and, like you said, not fighting, but just standing firm. I think there's a difference between fighting against something and standing for something. Barre, when you took a journey to NorCal, it actually started in Maui, which I love. We just spent a month there, and you had a clinic for 15 years. But even before that, you were deep into athletics. As we talk about this confluence of what it means to be human, what it means to be free, what it means to be healthy and well, can you paint a fairly quick picture of just your journey to NorCal from Maui and from athletics?
Sure. Well, actually, I was born in Northern California. And then I went away to college. I left right after high school. I grew up in West Marin County. It was all dairy ranches. My wife's family was out there too. They're long generational cattle ranchers. And my ancestors, however, were kind of just off the boat. They're Italian and immigrants. My mom was from Peru. So they were very agrarian-based, land-based also. So I grew up with that kind of thing. But then they got into the dairy business, and that was out in West Marin. So yeah, it's always been about, being grounded in the earth and growing things. That's just the way I grew up. But when I went through college, I was on an athletic scholarship. I played at top level ranked football teams, and all that sort of thing. And I was, that was like late 60s, early 70s. And I was that first generation. I was really getting into scientific training. So I, became self-taught in nutrition and all sorts of things, even when I was in college. And then I thought, well, the best way to learn more about the body, which I became fascinated with, and up my training, was to go to medical school. So I was in pre-med and ended up doing medical training. So that was where I came from. And then I went back, met Deb, my wife. We started having kids, and we originally moved to Fiji because I also had a pretty severe surfing addiction. And from Fiji, we thought, our kids were toddlers. We thought, okay, maybe we, too far out there, even though we loved it. They're going to just grow up to be Fijian, which probably would have been a good thing. And we decided to move to Maui. So that's how we got to Maui. We spent a lot of years there. I had most of my professional years there. In Marin County, before we went to Maui, I had a very successful clinic. I also, before I went into alternative medicine, I, was in emergency medicine. I certified at Stanford and did that, then went back to retrain. And then after a number of years with my personal holistic practice, we moved it to Maui, and here we are. Now we're back to Northern California because the kids a long time ago wanted to go to college here on the mainland, so we all moved back together.
Man, it's like the true Joseph Campbell hero's journey: separation, initiation, and return. And so it's like Gilgamesh coming back. It's not actually that he found the chalice. It was like he was sharing the journey. So here you both are sharing the journey. You both weaved a tapestry called Alfa Vedic. It's funny, when I think of the word alpha, I fall into the trap, and maybe some people spell it wrong sometimes, ALPHA, but it's ALF. And I wonder why you chose that spelling as a business, as a mission, as a movement. What the term alpha with an F, Vedic, what does that mean to both of you? I'll just popcorn that.
Well, from a very pragmatic perspective, we wanted to stand out as a different brand. So just from a branding perspective, we wanted a little edge and something for search that would help us pop on, just when someone's searching our name. So that's helped a lot because there's not really many other spellings like that. And also it also alludes to the fact that we're renegades and rebels. We don't play by the rule book of language. So that was because that's sort of how we look at the world. Is in fact, Brian Lando, Barre's oldest son and one of the founders, he had a very successful fashion brand called Future Heretics that I worked with him on in LA, and it was a very successful. Like huge celebrities wore it, but it was cutting to the culture into a mainstream, sort of I hate to say normie world, but in that way. So we've always come from that aesthetic. So that was a huge part of it. And of course, the alpha aspect being the Western mind, right? So the idea of alpha and Vedic is East meets West, West meets East, how we bring both polarities together, both hemispheres in not only in our approach to formulations and stuff, but how we think with the left and right brain and all that. So that's sort of where that comes from. And then, of course, the Vedic side, the Vedic tradition and all that, Ayurvedic medicine and all that plays in. But that's really just to symbolize the East. East meets West. But really, we're not alphas, we're sigmas, Josh. Should be actually, I guess, Sigma Vedic now.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I was looking at on the screen right now for the audience watching on Spotify or YouTube is some shots of Barre in the lab. And I think about just this cool setup you have in NorCal. You have trees, you have a farm, you're bubbling things in containers like a conscious mad scientist. Did you ever, in your entire medical and alternative health career, Barre, think that you'd be where you are now, bubbling tinctures, making things on this level? Like, was that ever even a real thing for you, or did it happen completely out of your control?
It just organically evolved. The way I roll is I just kind of put one foot in front of another, and I don't really project too much into the future. Football led to medical studies, and one thing after another, we end up, I'm in surfing, I end up in the islands, and then we have a, international clinic. And, but along the way, I got really involved in studies in old school alchemy because I had a chemistry background through my, academics. And then I learned a different side of chemistry, which is more the qualitative side of chemistry, which you don't learn in academic studies. And also along the way, when I made that just whole transference into what we'll call bioterrain medicine, I really was able to observe firsthand that there's not just connections between mind, body, emotions, but they're all, one solid continuum. And then when you realize that we live in a matrix of sorts where others are trying to control us and that we are governed by fear, and then I was able to trace the origins of many of my clients, as far as their very serious conditions, to these, to these limitations that are artificially placed upon us. And then when we would, relieve those from people, then their physical body would get better. That led me into my studies in law, we'll say, not the way you learned in law school, because they, just like in medical school, they didn't teach me the good stuff, and lawyers don't learn the good stuff either. And, then that led me into what some people consider the sovereignty movement and so forth. And I just learned how to govern my affairs, stay in honor, not try to cheat anybody out of anything, but just realize that, no, your rules don't apply to me. And it's all based on contracts and things. Now I know the game. I don't have to be on anybody's plantation. And, one thing, it just seemed continuous with, or congruous, we should say, with medicine, is people have to free their minds, free their emotions, and realize they're powerful spiritual beings, and then the body will follow suit and have perfect health.
Wow. I mean, what a bomb drop that was. I think about the Law of Polarity. There's a really incredible talk, which we're going to link in our show notes today. So make sure y'all subscribe and click the links below this podcast. And you were talking about something really, really close to my heart. And that was this concept, this understanding of the Law of Polarity, which I find not just fascinating, but sacred. It's so deeply sacred. And what evil, or the forces of dark, let's just say malevolent energy in the world, which, by the way, lives inside of us, and it's our job to master that and control that and make sure that it stays in check. What people tend to forget in this supposed illusionary war of good versus evil is that this law of polarity applies to evil as well. So evil cannot perpetuate indefinitely. At some point, everyone comes home to roost. And so I wonder, again, popcorn for either of you who wants to answer this, because I know you're equally passionate about it. The law of polarity, for people that don't know, how would you describe that? And also, what does evil tend to forget in its hubris about the law of polarity?
Mike, I'll let you start, and maybe you give your take, and then I'll bring it more into an actual electrical phenomenon and explain it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fundamental precept of reality that nobody can get out of. It's how we see it in nature everywhere, as Barre alluded to, with the electrical phenomena of the cathode anode and how all of that works in terms of what generates energy. But it is, on a metaphysical end, it is one of the driving, engineered, dynamic functionality of the universe, and nobody can get out of it. It's law, right? It's a universal precept that everyone must adhere to, and all nature must adhere to. And all it means is that a polarity just means that there's opposites, right? We live in a duality matrix of this reality, and of course the idea is to get back to unity. But in this wonderful classroom on Earth, or wherever you want to call this realm, duality plays an important role for us to understand who we are and how we interact with things. We can't know anything in this realm without polarity. It's impossible to know good without evil. It's impossible to know tall without short, hot without cold. It's just the nature of this reality, and there's no way to get out of it.
And so before you go, Barre, I want to say that it's actually good. Polarity is good. It is the way in which we learn, is the balancing of opposites. Like, it's not just the yin yang, it's also night and day, and the way that our body sleeps and wakes, and the circadian clock and the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Like, we have all these biological structures that allow, just in witnessing that the law of polarity is real and it's here for us. It's not a bad thing. It's actually really beautiful. But I love the way you painted that on the metaphysical. Barre, on an electrical and on a medical, biological level, this is also playing out in ways in which I think you could paint a really fascinating picture of.
Yeah, and I go at it from this level because it's very practical for the work I did for years. Because when I treated a body, I had to understand how the creative mechanism works within bodies in order to fix bodies or to help people fix themselves. And if you understand the etheric mechanism that precipitates all matter and experience in our entire realm, we'll say, then you understand there's also something called the ether. Now, in my regular medical studies, of course, they say there's just space out there. There's nothing, but there's real ether. It's like fish swimming in water, but we're swimming in ether and we don't even realize it. But there's different levels of that continuum, and it starts with electricity. Electricity can only be precipitated in one way, and that is through an idea or a thought. Now, if we are sentient beings capable of thinking, then we are individualizations, co-creators, so to speak, that can become co-creators. Now, when we have an idea or a thought, then that creates an electrical spark, that creates a resonance, that resonance creates a separation that we call polarity. It's just basic electricity. The next level of the etheric medium goes down to what we call, that's the fire element, but the next level we call the air element, or it's portrayed by helium first, then nitrogen. There's a coagulation that happens, and we could go into great detail, but I'll spare you. Then the next level down is the oxygen or water element, was what the old alchemists talked about. And then that carries the informational fields into the final south pole, which is the salt pole or the carbon pole. And then that precipitates matter. So it all starts with an idea, an electrical stimulation, creates a polarity, then it goes through those steps, and we are creating our experience, our bodies, our everything within our realm every single moment, like a frame of a movie. Now, our job, like Mike is saying, is to bring those polarities into balance. And here's why. When we create that first polarity phenomena with a thought, that creates the beginning of a toroidal field. Now, a toroidal field is something that goes in two directions all the time. One is taking idea, informational fields, and compressing it into matter, as we just explained. Simultaneously, at the same moment, that precipitation or that compression of data is dispersing back up to the source. And if you have an equal exchange of compression and radiation, always giving it back to the source and realizing that there's a whole spiritual source behind all this that allows us to create in the first place, then you have perfect balance, and everything that you do create and experience is self-sustaining. evil is nothing more than being seduced into thinking that we're just the compression cycle of things, just simple matter without acknowledging the source. And what happens then, it has no sustenance. It's not sustaining. That's why you have, entropy in the outer world, including in our own bodies. So it's really understanding nature, but understanding the mechanisms of nature, and it's a living technology. And what's been kept from us is how things work, starting with the larger realm. And then, in fact, our bodies, our biological apparatus is actually a micro version of that larger etheric mechanism. When we know that, we can practice medicine more intelligently. We can be teachers, which is the true role of a physician, and then set our clients free rather than just thinking that we're trying to create a disease from a germ or something that, nature created called a disease, because that doesn't exist in nature. We create that by not understanding how to balance the polarities from the get-go.
Wow. Okay. So much to unpack there. This is why I think the body of knowledge that, both of you have been working on. How many years have you been in communion and in service through Alfa Vedic now? When did that start?
Roughly around 2014 is when really kicked off that initial thought form of Alfa Vedic and put it out into the ethers. And so, yeah, we've been going strong over 10 years. Our relationship, Barre and I have had a relationship over 20 years with just back and forth through my relationship with his oldest son, as I was saying, with Bryden. And we've just, this has been a lifetime for Barre, of course, and myself, just for me, investigating truth since I was a little kid and dealing with things like, the dream realm and out-of-body experiences and that sort of stuff. And then getting into like what the nature of money is at a very young age by reading The Creature from Jekyll Island. Props to my dad for giving me that book when I was 17.
Oh, yeah.
And then, that was a lot of stuff that connected Barre and I out of the gates, was like talking about that kind of stuff, like what freedom is, what the law really is, what money really is. And then, by the way, that all relates to health. Barre was like, do you realize that's what health is all grounded in? If you don't know how this stuff functions and works, you're going to be lost in your own ability to heal yourself. So it all comes together. It's all holistically intertwined and very important. And that's what we do on AlphaCast, is we try to weave all of these topics of truth together and ground them in sort of the true essence of nature and what real science is.
Well, we're deeply aligned, as my audience knows, and if you're joining us for the first time. So what we teach in Liberated Life and in the Breathe program and in really all of our content is this model that I developed through one of my mentors, Paul Chek, and he had the quadrant of wellness. And this is a great conversational piece for us, because in Paul's model, it is the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And the more that I grappled with really modernity and exiting the matrix on my own terms, becoming a free man, was really understanding the financial implications, to which I either master my finances or the powers that be use finance to dumb me down and control me. So in my teaching, I actually developed a pentagon. And so there's the ground floor, which is the physical, which I know that we're going to go even deeper into. And then the walls are made of mental, emotional. Now on the top, there is the spiritual, because Barre, like you said, if we are disconnected from that, then we're actually dishonoring nature. We're dishonoring the creation that we exist in. But I added on the financial piece to make it a pentagon. It's on the screen now, because I struggled so much, you guys. Ever since I was a little kid, I'm like, what is this money? What are taxes? Why are adults so angry? What is this existential tension that I feel in my bones? And I was a little kid feeling this, you guys. And I know everyone here, just feel into your heart. I know that this is existential pain for you too, because we felt it. We have watched our parents, our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents trade their lives and their soul for money. And the only way out of this mess is through. The only way out is through. If we are to be a sovereign, free human being, we must master finances. But there is a money wound, and I'd like to talk about this with you guys, because the money wound, our beliefs about what money is, what we have been told that money is actually 180. It has nothing to do with what we've been told. It has nothing to do with what we believe. Money is a medium of exchange, just like tribes back on a beach would trade shells and stones, yet we have forgotten our way. We have lost our way so deeply about what money actually is that we've unconsciously given away our power to totalitarian regime. And that regime is ever present today. And that is what feeds the media doctrines and the dogma we see with medicalization and just the entire sick machine itself. So who wants to take that?
Yeah. We call that the Babylonian money magic. And it's funny, I'm actually talking about this in Australia next week at the Living Free Festival. My talk is on the currency of experience and a new way to do commerce in the private as sovereign men and women in honor. And money, is one of the greatest inventions of modern civilization. But as with any technology, if it's not adhered to certain principles of honor, and it can obviously, like a firearm or fire, it can be used for great evil and great harm, going back to that polarity concept. And so, yes, we don't have real money anymore. That was taken out in 1933 in the United States with the Banking Emergency Act as they manipulated the stock market crash after World War I. This was all planned coming out of the 1913, creating the Fed, of course, in the United States. And every country has followed this. So we actually, in the public, in the corporate fiction world, we don't have real money. Everything is based on debt, and it's a public credit system that's all based on the value of the human life, So that's why you have the birth certificate. We can go down all those rabbit holes.
We've gone deep. We did a quadcast with Alex Zek, Luke Story, and Aaron Abke, and we went very deep into common law. So we'll link that. We'll link that in our show notes. But please continue, because I'm really interested in the energetic and the etheric aspect of this from Barre. But please, Mike, continue.
Yeah. So it's funny. So traditionally, United States common law was to be basically be the ground foundation of law in the states, and that was taken out and moved into commerce and maritime law during that time in the 30s. So everything in the public is commerce. Everything is trading, basically trading your life source through debt. So every time you take a note that's a US dollar, that is a debt instrument, and that is you further capitalizing your own soul into the system. So, and what's crazy is people don't realize this, but in this public credit system, we are the creditors. Not the banks, not the government. We are the ones providing the value through our life source and through our land. They've mortgaged all of the land into the public. So it in a weird way, and Barre's mentioned this on past AlphaCast, there's actually kind of a brilliant thing they did in their own inverted, twisted way in the 1930s to create this public credit system. And this is something I'm working on in the private, but in honor, and a credit through being an honor. And because in the end, money, what is money? Money was always a proxy, right? It was traditionally gold was always the best money because it was the most saleable, which just means it moved the best across time, across space, and could scale well. And because gold does not break down, it's very rare, and you can break it into little pieces pretty easily. And it's universally accepted because of that. However, and there's a lot of other, and Barre can touch on this, like a lot of very divine properties to gold. But however, in the end, we're still looking at and I think where we kind of get into a trap here is we're looking at a store of value. And when you have any sort of element that's a store of value, as people prize that and want to hold on to that for the future, and greed sets in. And then with that, it creates a momentum of trying to find more of that. And the reason why gold has held the test of time is because it's so rare. But what's that led to? It's led to great wars. It's led to destroying, digging into all over the planet, searching for it. And like the Austrian economists will say, well, gold has led to the great renaissance of the 1800s when we were on a true gold standard. But if you look at what was happening in the 1800s, and this isn't even touching on stuff we've talked about with great resets and all that kind of fun stuff, but the amount of war we had in the 1800s alone, due to the principalities fighting over, the really gold and power, was insane. So I often think of Tolkien, the great writer, who has Smaug in The Hobbit, who's this beautiful divine dragon who's been completely manipulated and controlled by the hordes of gold. And then you've got, of course, Sauron, the mechanistic evil that's just here to control materialism in the material world. And that's really, I think, where we need to get out of. even with hard money, is moving into a means to interact with each other and engage through a means of commerce just through honor, like the ancient Essenes did, and the Tibetan monks, and understanding it's not just purely barter, because that can be kind of limiting, but a credit based on honor through acceptance and through understanding us really where the true value of where the energy comes from, which is our thoughts, as we were saying, and how we can apply that qualitatively into a new currency system. So that's what I've been working on based on time and experience. And it's been quite a fun ride working on that, and since 2018. And that's what I'll be talking about next week, and sort of things we can do to embrace new technologies like blockchain in the right way, done through consensus, through the right consensus, to create new equitable systems in the private.
Wow. I mean, the intellectual understanding of money and blockchain and gold is probably just equally as powerful as the spiritual understanding as well, because everything we do is spiritual. I don't care if it's how you eat breakfast or how you greet your children in the morning. Like there is so much wrapped into this conversation. So Barre, when we look at the energetic expression of what we're talking about here, which essentially is money, but money is this medium of exchange. How does this play out for you personally, and also medically and spiritually? Because Mike, you did a great job of describing the history, which again, we're going to link that episode we did on common law. It was many hours long, and we won't have time to go into that today, but there's such a treasure chest there. There's such a treasure chest of freedom and of really liberation if y'all start to understand what Mike was sharing. But Barre, I pass it to you, because from a biological, medical, and also etheric spiritual understanding of money, how does that play out for you, and where are you at right now as far as your understanding and your consciousness around money?
First, to understand all of that, you really need to understand the mechanism of money, some of which Mike was explaining. And if you go back to when they took the gold away, we'll say, they passed House Joint Resolution 192, and that then set us up with a different species of money, so-called. There would be a new medium of exchange. But in that House Joint Resolution, they had built in a loophole, because if they said, okay, we're taking your gold away and now you have to use our money, that's called trafficking in slaves. And they couldn't do that. They knew they could be liable on the international court for that. So what that said is that we will compensate you dollar for dollar for all the money, the gold that we take away. And from that point on, what people don't realize, we lived in a prepaid status. That means you go into the car dealership, and just because you are now the new standard, because there's no gold, it's based on the full faith and credit of the American people. You want that Mercedes with the Blaupunk radio, whatever, you just say, wrap it up and you drive it out and it's yours. And because we're the ones that provide the labor, the know-how, all the ingenuity behind creating everything and providing the mechanical parts, the mining, and everything that goes into manufacturing. But they very cleverly, at the same time, brought in the birth certificate, all that kind of stuff, and had us sign up, through contracts, so that we said, well, you know what, we'll actually be the surety, and, we'll pay taxes, we'll use your money, species, and everything. And so everybody was kept ignorant, but we were free at that moment, and that was the original Federal Reserve System. Now, along the same time that was all going on, people were, led into wars and all sorts of things that really kept them preoccupied with, staying away from the truth in the first place. Now, in my journey, I met up with a couple gentlemen that really opened my eyes as far as how that system works. One was Eustace Mullins, and the other was G. Edward Griffin, who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island. I was involved on a steering committee of a large group back in the early 90s, where we started doing large educational seminars. We got busted up by the FBI all the time because we're spreading too much truth. This was pre-internet, and they didn't want this information out. So we had to go offshore, but we were putting on seminars with 4,000 or 5,000 people, week-long events, And we'd have people like G. Edward Griffin and everybody coming in. Okay, so that's the mechanics. We learn how things work. Now, on a spiritual level, money was never necessary in the first place. If you consider that in past, there's 2 golden ages, to be specific, in which people did not have money. They were in full capacity of their creative abilities to precipitate their needs without the need for a middleman. So just like the Vatican creating priest, where now you need a middleman between you and God, the same thing. Now we have a middleman between our own creative abilities and capacities called money, and it's called a transmitting utility. And if you go into the Uniform Commercial Code, that now has usurped the entire constitutional premise for law in Article 3 courts. And now it's all about commerce. And in the commercial code, it talks about transmitting utilities, creditors, debtors, and everything else. Now, if you know all of that, you can become a creditor and not be a debtor, or i.e. a slave. And at the same time, you can be free of this money beast once and for all. But that's another whole technology, a different way of discharging what people think of as debts and everything. But the real downside, if we want to get into the spiritual aspects, is that now we were taking our mind off of source. And just like we're explaining before, we're in a one-way linear entropic fashion. The only way we can survive is through money, rather than understanding we're the source of everything in the first place. So the real evil, if you want to call it that, is it has made us ignorant of who we are, where we come from, and our unlimited capacity. And that was the goal in the first place. And it's not a conspiracy. These were all intended outcomes by whoever you want to call them, that wanted to enslave the entirety of mankind in the first place. So first you have to understand how things work, just like in medicine. And then you have to understand how it's one energetic matter continuum, and then learn how to work the whole continuum. Now, in my own personal experience, having gone through everything everybody goes through with just all your concerns about money and raising a family and getting, a job and, making, in my case, making a clinic work, keeping the wheels on the wagon. Along the way, the more I learned and the more I understood on both levels, materialistic and spiritual, a funny thing happened, whereas the less I concerned myself about money, the greater the manifestations and the more positive the outcomes that started happening.
That's big. What do you attest to that? The less you focus, the more it flowed.
Well, with experience, we realized, no, money is not my source. And if I keep my focus on the real source, whatever that means to you, you can call it God, you can call it the spirit that moves through all things, you can call it your I am presence. It doesn't matter. We're all talking about the same thing. The more, if I like to do an accounting at the end of every day, and what it is you have two sides of the ledger. And if your thoughts are on problems, symptoms, lack, more than just unlimited capacity, that's going to be your experience. Now, the more you go through with life and just experiment in different practices, martial arts was a big thing in my life too, because I learned how to direct energy through that and actually perform better physically, something that I wish I would have known back in my old football days. But then you start understanding that, it's really, manifestation isn't really about just getting a job or going to the gym. In fact, when I was in ball, my last few years, and I was very precise about my training at different times, and I'd always get it down on paper, I noticed a peculiar thing. When I got my program down after I was more experienced, my body would just start transforming before I even got to go out on the track and do 440 repeats or anything. So it's like, oh, wow, just the intention alone, my physicality is actually transforming. I noticed the same thing with my finances. It's too long of a story to tell here, but I was involved in international finance for a period because I had a lot of very interesting clients who some of them were even from these elite families and so forth. And one of them put me on the board of an international chain of banks in order to oversee humanitarian funding. There's prime ministers involved, all sorts of things. And in the process, we started doing some good things because we had billions available to do these things. But that posed a threat against the vested interest of other folks. So they kind of came after us. So I got to experience being very wealthy and then all of a sudden having everything taken, as we were targeted by the powers that be. But rather than getting shook up about it, my wife and myself just at that point had a lot of experience with our inner practices and manifested within a short year back to where we thought we had lost a bunch. That was a very, powerful experience because we knew our way out of a jam. Our kids are in college. We, a big loss relative to many years of work of accumulation and everything. But because we knew where things come from in the first place, that's where we put our mindset and then just reinvented ourselves on the instant. Now we're out, we own a farm, we have a business, and we really don't concern so much about the money. We have bank accounts, we have to do all that. But our experience is every single day getting together and setting our intentions, and those intentions just manifest almost like magic everything we need, whether we need more help on the farm, whether we need, money to manifest a building. And so that's where we come from. It's not even looking at the bank account anymore. And that's what we're all capable of. And that's the biggest secret. But that's why they created money, is to keep our eye off the ball so that we would come into our true power and figure out we don't need their species of money, their banks, or anything in the first place. And there would be a very elegant way to balance out energy on our own without CPAs and bookkeepers, counting beans. We could do that very much if we lived in an enlightened society where everybody was in honor with each other, and we would simply produce, and that energy output would automatically come back to us and nobody would need to keep score. So that's where we're headed. We're still a little ways away from that, but that's more the spiritual side. And then when it comes to bodies, when you realize that you are not dependent on anything external, that's when you regain your health. And money is one of the biggest obstacles that people have to overcome as far as taking the tension out of their neurology in order to heal their bodies.
So good. Everyone rewind that and play it again. Because
that was lot right there.
No, really. I mean, that was beautiful. The way you explained that, what I was visualizing as you were talking, Barre, was just an IV hooked up to every single human being that has ever felt that existential pressure. And inside of that IV is a manufactured concern about, will I have enough? Will there be enough? Will there ever be enough money? Will my kids be able to eat well? Can we have the house we want? Like all these, it takes my breath away actually, which is actually a key indicator. Whenever I'm not breathing, this is why breath work has been such a big part of my life. It's in the absence of breathing, in the absence of breath, when I'm robbing my body of oxygen, that I'm more monetizable, that I'm more open to being under the control of illusionary fear. And everything that you just said, I was visualizing, because whenever someone's speaking, I'm always seeing pictures in my mind. And every human being at some time in their life, and maybe even right now you're feeling this, you feel like there's an IV of stress when it comes to the subject of money. And I think you did a really good job of stoking the curiosity inside of someone listening and watching, that actually is completely false. We do not have to believe that this IV stuck in our arm is real. We can actually just take it out. We can remove the catheter and we can go in a different direction. Mike, you had talked about something that was fascinating. You talked about gold being the initial store of value. It was such this prized possession. And one of our partners, whom I love, and if you don't know them, then we get to all come together. We're having an event here in Austin, and hopefully y'all can come. And it's a company called Mana. And Mana combines Shilajit and Ormus, But there's a new model that's coming out where there's actually some gold, nanoparticles of gold in the Shilajit and Ormus. And what I learned from David and Brad is that gold is actually a superconductor, and it starts to connect the conscious and unconscious mind. And the Essenes, which I believe both of you have mentioned in your teachings, and I know on this podcast I've heard it already, the Essenes used to give their children gold because they knew that it was this superconductor between the conscious and unconscious. Therefore, it would make one less available or less open to being an illusionary fear. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I'll just say something real quick. Gold, which I was actually intending to get to in my last comments, is precipitated solar energy. And if you understand the old alchemical teachings, which are very real things that I can demonstrate physically in my laboratory, gold is light that is condensed. So that's why in the prior golden ages, all the architecture was ordained lavishly with gold. There was no lack of it. And the only reason why it seems rare now is because certain people are trying to hoard it. And there is a real intelligence behind the stores of gold that put it here in the first place. So it is kind of a contrived thing, having it rare. It's really not rare. Now, in all the things that I make in my lab, I use Ormus, as you call it. Ormus is orbitally rearranged monatomic elements, which is based on an old atomic theory of matter, which is pretty antiquated. You have to get more into waveform mechanics to understand it. But Ormus gold is actually transitional gold. It's transitional state, which means it's not yet metallic. It's actually ceramic. It has very unique properties. That's why I put it in all my formulas. And we have a new way of doing it now, rather than concentrating it from salts and everything, which is what most people still do. We actually make a concentration, then grow crystals. So it's very pure and very powerful. So Ormus and transitional gold are super, super important, just like you're talking about it. And we have it in everything we make.
What is the intelligence behind gold to which you speak?
There are very intelligent beings, just like you and I, that are occupying different levels of consciousness, not necessarily in physical embodiment. They work within this realm along with elementals and other sentient life forms that are behind every single plant that grows, tree that grows, every mineral in the ground. And they are the ones that are manifesting that into our realm on our behalf to provide for our needs.
And I'll just add a tag. The point too is essentially evolve into being one of those. It's from all of my understanding is we're in a continual evolution, not Darwinian evolution, which is, materialistic and stuff and
Yes.
based on a lot of false science around genetics and everything. But no, we are here to evolve. This is a classroom for us to learn and to evolve.
Yes.
And now just one thing to tag on the money thing too is those who do end up worshiping money for money's sake do create an egregore of sort of a money god. There is a money god. It is an energetic that exists. And the more that you worship it, the more it's going to ask of you. And so that's why it's so important not to earn money for money's sake. It's to find, as Barre was saying, find a vocation, what you're passionate about in life, and to create. We're here to create and create experiences and to have beautiful, loving experiences. And when you do that, then the after effect is abundance that comes in the form of money, whether that be a fiat money, a gold money, it doesn't matter in the end.
This is what I've been talking about with my team. So members of my team, we have this discussion, and we have this discussion on AMAs and on the podcast. I got to tell you, I just think we're in the sweet spot of this conversation. I freaking love talking to you guys about this because this is the crux of change. This is the fulcrum to which really liberation and freedom exists. It's this money piece. It's this true understanding of the nuances and the layers of money. It's interesting because the more that I have focused on truly being of service. In the beginning, when I started the podcast, I was coming from an enormous amount of scarcity. And I know that you both have been there at certain points in your life, whether it was the clinic, Barre, or maybe, not enough DJ gigs, Mike, I don't know. We've all experienced it, right? This dragon, this supposed dragon that is actually us. It's constructed from our own fear. And the only way to actually meet the dragon is just to have the courage in order to do so. I think there's so much of a money wound to get to my point earlier. We've seen our parents suffer. And like I say this with real compassion, real compassion. I saw my mother struggle. I saw my father struggle. My brother, my entire lineage, paternal and maternal, has had such a deep, painful relationship with money. Yet the wool has been covering the eyes for so long, it almost feels on a societal level that there's an opportunity cost that would have to be paid on a very deep level for us to truly look at the concepts you're both presenting. And I think that cognitive bias about what money is, or what medicine is, or what school is, or education is, these are all the constructs that are beginning to decay. And it's both liberating and exciting, but it also brings up, I think, a massive fear in a lot of people, because the question that arises is, well, what would we do without money? How would we be able to have the social constructs of hierarchies, and who's going to clean the toilets? And, well, what do you mean that somebody that owns a hotel chain doesn't need money? And are they as valuable as the person who cleans the toilets? And to all of this, I just say, this is part of the theater. This is part of the theater that we signed up for. And this theater is literally like in the green curtain that was pulled back in The Wizard of Oz. We're the ones on the microphone, y'all. This is all the creation of our own imagination, which, Barre, you described earlier. The imagination is what creates that electrical impulse. So you can see that in our conversation, everything is so intertwined, but still the question remains, what would we do without money? How would we function as a society without money? Because this is why I added it to the Pentagon, to what I teach. So I'm curious, what will we do without money?
Well, it's interesting because it's a chicken and egg scenario. Is the reality that we see in society because of the social constructs we create, or is it because the money that's created the social constructs? So in other words, you bring up the example, who's going to clean the toilets? Well, people are cleaning toilets because we've lived in this realm of money. If you live in a realm without money, then you're going to be living in a holistic society that's much more grounded in honor and nature. And you'll probably, you won't have massive hotel chains. You won't have concrete cities that have, with this idea of exponential growth and infinite money supply and infinite growth models. You'll have a holistic connection to the earth. So you won't have any of these, like all these problems go away. But we are coming from a mindset, a frame of reference from the money world of having money. So you have to kind of like invert everything. That's why I'm a big fan of reading the Ringing Cedars books and Anastasia, because I don't know if you're familiar with those at all, Josh.
Shout out to Carrie Michelle. We have the entire library, and we've mentioned it on the podcast with Alex from Eon. So we've made a reel about the Ringing Cedars. I mean, this is like incredible intelligence you're speaking of.
Rad. Yeah, we've done multiple podcasts with Gabriel Miguel, who's the founder of the Anastasia Foundation in the United States. And but you know, for those who aren't familiar, Anastasia, she's this really the original man, this recluse in Russia, in the taiga, up in the in the wilderness of northern Russia in Siberia, and she is tapped into the original foundation of like the pre-civilization that was throughout the entire world before, quote unquote, like the fall or the takeover. And we lived in pure and as Barre was saying, balance of the polarity and within the rhythms and everything of nature. And so the true intelligence, the true technology is inside us in conjunction with nature. And so the commerce done is just all natural. It's just all in flow. And there's not the mechanistic materialism of the technocracy, as she calls it. So we're coming from this foundation of technocracy, where everything has to be like the machine, going back to Sauron and Saruman in the Lord of the Rings, right? And bringing the machine in, and the machine is not what we need. What we need is go back to our consciousness and how we co-create with each other. And when we go back to that, and as Barre was saying, then whether we use gold or whether we use an honor system or an honor credit system, pure bartering, all of that, it doesn't really matter, because we're all in just the pure abundance of the realm, and we're not in scarcity anymore. So you would have, for instance, cleaning the bathrooms. Let's say that you do have a village. Well, it's an honorable thing for a teenager coming up in the society to take on that role, because it's honorable to keep our bathrooms clean, right? So it's a total flip of how we think and how we and that is, I think, how we get there is by going into the private, by going into smaller communities and testing this out in smaller communities to start.
What do you feel, Barre?
Well, like if you go to old school medicine, you had a master in the village that the community supported because they wanted that practitioner to be very masterful, and they recognized that that was his vocation, what he came into this embodiment to do. And it was in their best interest to support that individual so that he could be the very best he could be. And if another generation sought that same vocation, then they felt it an honor to be able to be selected by the master to learn. And they were very open and willing to sweeping his floors and cleaning his toilet and fetching him food. And you know, that's just the way it would work. And I don't know about you, but, you know, the more you interact with people on a different level, we're very selective on who we have in our life these days. You know, not in any manner of judgment, but just, you know, there's certain types of energies you choose to have around you. And the people in our life, we all recognize when things are just maintaining a nice balance. So if something gets done for somebody, it's just a natural reciprocation, and everybody just keeps it square as they go. And that's the way I believe a whole society should work. Now, the one thing we haven't really touched on too much is the real cure, which is to reconnect with nature. There's a reason why I live out here off grid, miles away from cell service and everything. And when you are in wilderness area, which we are, and if you farm, you know, we have a medicinal herb farm, then you learn there's no such thing as black. In the surrounding wilderness area, everything is pristine, everything just self-sustains. And then we mimic that whole process here on our farm. You know, we call it permaculture, biodynamics, it doesn't matter. But, you know, you learn nature's ways and then you follow suit, and everything grows great. The insects don't take too much. You don't try to kill them because you realize they're part of the ecosystem. And, you know, you've got the animals, you've got bears and elk and deer and otters, and, you know, we've got the river life down there. And everything's pretty copacetic when you just leave nature alone. That includes our own bodies. And that's the way we could all live. You know, we have a toilet outside the bathhouse, and you know, it's just self-cleaning. There's worms in there that gobble up all the stuff. We don't need sewer systems. You know, it's water flush. It's not funky or, you know, hippy-dippy or anything. You know, we live very nicely and elegantly out here, but we've learned how to use natural mechanisms so that we can be off-grid, be self-sufficient, but more than anything, create you know, for 7 generations, you know, so those generations down the line have, you know, better soil than, you know, than what we came into, because if you're doing it right, you keep improving things. So you're not just thinking of yourself, you're always thinking about your grandkids and their grandkids. Mm-hmm. And, you know, why would you want to spoil that? It's just unconscious, but as soon as you remove yourself from nature and you cover the earth with concrete and everything that we see, and bombard ourselves with Wi-Fi and blast ourselves with 5G and breathe toxins that are aerosolized in this, you know, everybody goes to sleep and nobody cares about anything except entertaining their own fears, which go back to money. You don't search a vocation. You say, how much money can I make?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the medical aspect, because one thing I've heard from a few different guests, and that I feel within my bones when I absorb this medicine, is this concept from Japanese medicine called Shinrin Yoku, which is forest bathing. And so if the patients in Japan are going through stressors or they're having idiopathic concerns, they would actually just prescribe to their patient that he or she goes out and spends time in nature and hugs a tree. And it's so interesting because we've covered these concepts so much, but I really want everyone to feel this. You can hear a message 100 times, but on the 101st time, if your soul is willing, if you have a pure heart and a pure intention to actually receive the message, it'll finally stick. So you know that vitamin D from the sun is healthy for you. You know that being in nature and having a life that's designed to be in nature, even experiential ecological nature training for children, and removing, by the way, your children from public school, My children will never touch public school because they could be infected to a massive degree by a mind virus. These concepts are so easy. It's like design your life around nature. But the practicality of this, you guys, the practicality of people that are deep in the machine, let's just say living on Fifth Avenue in New York, but yet their soul is coming alive to this message. How does that change begin?
Well, I'll just say I have a lot of friends that are amazing souls, like my partners that do Music in Sky with me. They live in LA. Once again, it comes down to resonance. It comes down to the power of thought, right? And how we create our reality. And so you can be on Fifth Avenue and head down to Central Park and be in nature there and engage with the elementals, as Barre was saying, in a way where you can bring beauty back to that city. And once again, this comes down to the hero's journey and the vocation that the contract you've signed for yourself in this embodiment. And it's an admirable thing if you're conscious and awake in living in New York City. That means you are doing the work, my friend.
Yes, you are.
And we need people doing the work there if we want that place to heal and come back and not turn into a complete and total deserted area, which it has. Same with LA, same with Chicago, all of these places, because those, in the end, the Renaissance will be in those places. And because in every golden age, you had beautiful cities. You had places that were fully engaged and intertwined, that were cityscapes that had nature flowing through them through divine technologies, right? That were not the death spiral wave of technologies that we have now, which are all explosions, right? Everything's combustion, explosion. It was both. It was, and it was implosion and it was regenerative. And so we've talked about this on AlphaCast since the beginning. Imagine walking through a city with healing chimes everywhere and regenerative, gardens that you can just pick food from, food forests everywhere that's just free for everyone to eat from because it's all natural abundance. And water technologies flowing through that are taking consciousness through that allow you to communicate through water, and getting rid of all of this really crude electrical science and going to the etheric sciences and stuff. And then that leads to cultural blossoming into psychic abilities and all that stuff, because we are a communal person. We are a communal, humanity is meant to be together, not to be off alone in the wilderness. And we're very lucky because we have community here. We've got people that have moved here. We have neighbors that are awesome, and we get to do work parties and hang out and stuff. But due to the nature of the reality of modernity right now, yes, we had to to be able to do the work that we do and deliver the quality that we do with our products. We had to leave the cities for now. But that's not to say those cities cannot evolve back to what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, I've felt this quite a bit in my own life, and it's probably what led me to be a personal trainer after athletics. And it was this just unwavering quest that I've always had for the question of, and I felt it ever since I was a little kid, how do I live my life well? This concept of wellness and well-being, it's just been on my heart ever since I could remember. Ever since I could remember that I had a memory, it was this question. And it was always like, well, this isn't the way. There was a part of me that knew very, very young that the way in which I saw my parents living their lives, and even my grandparents, bless them, and they did the absolute 100% best they could with the level of consciousness conditioning that they had. But it would almost be, I wonder how you guys feel about this. Now that we know what we know, it does not make us better than our ancestors. It does make us more aware. And it would be such a slap in the face to my grandfather and my parents and my future lineage, my children and their children, for me to not act from this place, from this sacred knowing that we've so poked and prodded and almost like a lotus, it's been unfolding here from the mud in which it feels like we live sometimes. But the challenge in doing this is that we actually must learn that we are free, we are loved, we are on the right path, we are a child of the Creator. We would not have been created if there was not a Creator. And I find it so fascinating that science has become this God that is worshipped, and we've all been cajoled into worshiping the God of science as if that is going to bring us liberation and deliverance. And that to me is a message I would really love for everyone to share. So share this podcast if you feel what we feel, if this is resonating for you. But I pass the question back. Knowing what we know now, do you believe that it's a disservice to our ancestors? Not from shame. I'm not saying my motivation is from shame or blame, but I feel that it would be a slap in the face to all the people that suffered so much so that I could have what I have now, and also my children. I mean, it makes me want to cry just thinking about my son's life and my daughter's life, what that's going to be like in the future when I come from this heart space. And I imbue that, and I will teach that to them. But how do you gentlemen feel about this? And what are the ways in which you're teaching your children and this movement of Alpha Vedic? What is the resounding call, the fist in the air, not to fight, but to stand for something real again?
It goes back to the balance of the polarities again. It's about, in Oriental medicine, we call it the Wei Qi. It's the external yang, where, you have a right to draw your demarcation, and not allow people to traverse into your energetic space if you, don't invite them in. And then at the same time, honoring the inner principle. We're talking on a podcast yesterday how a lot of indigenous cultures are matriarchal, not in a feminist sense, but because that inner core, and the same thing within Oriental medicine, when that inner core is protected, then it will then in turn nurture and regenerate and, continue. So rather than looking at things as individuals from different generations, I think we have to look at things through the eyes of larger cycles. And all of us go through phases in our own life. I look at, past parts of my life and I say, what the hell was I thinking about? But, that's why we play the game. It's an expansion of consciousness. I don't like the term evolution because it connotes kind of a linear sort of concept, where it's an expansive process. And just like maybe the generation before us, we could say, well, they're clueless about certain things. Well, no, that was just a different phase of a larger cycle, and we're all one continuous life form. If you knock off the concept of separation between you and I and generations and civilizations and races and sexes, it's one larger life form, not in a communistic sense because we all have our individualization. But really the largest ill we have to overcome is the illusion of separation, which starts from thinking that there's some separation between us and the source in the first place. So just like maybe larger cycles and different civilizations or just generations that we can recall in our own lifetime, it's all part of the same process, but there's a larger spiral that's culminating right now, which is in fact bringing us into another shift in consciousness collectively. So no, I don't think it pays at all, to answer your question, to denigrate or criticize anybody who's gone before there before us, because they're in fact the reason why we're here in the first place, able to have this conversation.
Right. Well, to your point, yes. So, and I hope I articulated it well, and maybe I didn't, but what I'm saying is it's not that there's any blame to be put on our ancestors in any regard. And actually there's a blessing and a gratitude I feel for them because I'm afforded to do what I do now. I mean, how grateful I am, so grateful that my grandfather sacrificed in World War II and that my mother went through her bipolar and that my father had his journey that allowed me to be alive. Of course, there's no shame. What I'm saying is they did the best they could with the level of consciousness they had at that time. And so as we are afforded this new level of consciousness, again, this is not from an egoic place. Like we just know something that they were never afforded to know. They did. We are the chosen ones. And I don't say that because we're better. I believe that there is connections from the past that make us equal, but yet we find ourselves here where this information is so readily available. And here we are, you guys, talking to people around the world. And so what I'm saying is once we know, the only way to actually evolve is to tap into the part of evolution that's in the etymology itself, and that is love. The word love is baked into the word evolve. So really what I'm talking about is the way that we can love our ancestors and love our future generations is by taking the awareness and the consciousness we have now and actually putting it to use, to develop the courage to put it to use, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more, man. And that's why also we look back to like, it's great. My folks moved up here. So I'm blessed to have my kids' grandparents right up the street, and they get to go and hang out with grandma and grandpa and learn from them, because there's a heck of a lot to learn from these our elders who
Yes, yes.
and definitely coming up at a different perspective, right, and had different strengths that we just are disconnected from as well, and then their folks and then their folks. So through the generations, I think everything's fractal. As Barre is saying, we often get caught in the movie frame of progression, but everything in the end is fractal and all at once. And it's all about, I think, one of the traps right now living in the age of information is we often get too stuck in the mental plane and forget that, what there's a whole other side of it on the emotional heart side. And I think people that were really tapped into the land back then, like my great grandparents and stuff, that they were, I think, functioning in a totally different reality that we can't even consider or know. So to be able to like hang out with people that are really old from that time is so precious and so amazing. But yes, I do believe that most of the people that are here right now have incarnated to specifically carry us forward into a new reality. And I think a lot of people that have come from right now probably were at the last fall, whether that be Atlantis, Lemuria, or whatever, and have a lot of karmic stuff to clear up. So we all are here to do work and have a duty. And yeah, it's to honor our past and to move forward in sort of in love and honor. And it's all beautiful and it's all great at the same time. So yeah, and my boys get to grow up and see all that, and they have an understanding that hey, it's about living your hero's journey in the end and not judging and just doing your best to be an honor and to be a beautiful man. And I will say we've seen an unfoldment of the new masculine in a way that's really exciting to see. Whereas I will say in the past, like you had to be tough and be a badass, and opening up that heart now is pretty cool to see with men these days.
Well, I'm sure everybody's felt that from all of us here. And, my mission with this podcast is to really just share authentically my own learnings, my own journey, and to spotlight people that I believe have true wisdom. I mean, y'all do. So I say that with reverence. Like, this has been really, really stoking the wisdom of everyone that's been with us here. The last question for you both is something that I already pointed to when I was a little kid. It was the thing I wanted to know. How do I live my life well? And with everything that you've been through, I'll start with you, Barre, as we say goodbye. From Maui to learning about medicine and understanding now the plant intelligence and being on a farm, like, it's been a journey, man. It's been a journey for you. How do you define wellness and well-being? Looking back on your journey, what do you think you got wrong about wellness in the past? And what do you believe wellness is for you now?
My experiences taught me that there were never any mistakes. It was all purposeful. And I, like a lot of people, I think, are our own worst critics. And forgiveness is the largest task that we all have in our lives, and realize that we weren't bad, we weren't wrong, we had experiences. Just like starting an algebra class, you aren't expected to, pass the final exam on day one. That's why we play the game. So what I've learned is just to be a little easier on myself and to realize that this self, I am not this persona. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a farmer. I'm not a podcaster. None of this is who I am. There's a great one who one time said, "See no man after the flesh." And what he was referring to is that we are not these outer avatars. We are something much greater. There's another old saying that where angels fear to tread. In other words, we are all powerful spiritual beings in uncountable numbers in different realms. And not everybody chooses to have the experience of embodying into a realm such as this, because it can be harsh and there are inherent risk. And so I think not that we need to just lay back on our laurels. On the other hand, we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit, each one of us, and recognize each other as very brave souls that are, as Michael said, on a hero's journey. So I think experience tells you more than anything that realize who you are in the first place. This isn't who we are. And sometimes even the most sinister people out there that we read about in the news and so forth, not that we have to put up with their shenanigans at all. We can, not allow that in our world, but at the same time, see them who they are, because anything that we acknowledge in anybody or anything automatically draws that resonance back into ourself. So it's a very dual-edged sword when we start understanding the roles that different people play, even people that seem evil. You want to know what's going on, keep your ear to the ground, but not take resonance into yourself, because where your attention is what you become. I'd say that's the biggest takeaway so far in my experience.
Thank you for sharing. That's powerful. And I say that people throw around that word powerful. If someone were to really let that sink in, what you shared, they could probably ease a lot of their suffering curve in life. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, what do you feel? Go easy.
I was going to say what Barre said.
Easy. Yeah.
What Barre said.
No, it has to be original. Like what is your understanding now? My question when I was young, how do you answer that question for yourself? That what is wellness? What is well-being? What does that even mean to you?
Well, I mean, to me, it's kind of unfolded that wellness is freedom. I was seeking all these ways to find the truth of what's the nature of the government and reality. Are there underground bases? Or are the aliens doing, like the military control systems? How can I be free of it all? Meanwhile, I was dealing with chronic strep throat every year and, getting sick a lot, being a DJ, partying, doing all that. And it was really once I started to come to a greater understanding of that I don't need to project out to an officialdom, to some sort of external source to heal me like a doctor, but that this is about the inner understanding of who I am and how I heal myself. Then that's where the freedom comes from. That's where the true understanding of how the reality works comes from. So it was through my wellness and health journey, coming to the better understanding of why I get sick in the first place, and then how I remedy that opened up all the other channels of truth, love, and freedom in my life. So it really was through the health journey where I became a man.
Sounds like one hell of an initiation.
Indeed.
Guys, this has been wonderful. And please, y'all, share this podcast with somebody that has been struggling with some of these concepts. Nothing we say is how you should think or how you should be. It's just offering information and knowledge and wisdom that you can begin to embody. That's the key word, right? To put it in your body and put it to use. So, gents, give the website, please, and just share a little bit about what you're doing with the podcast before we say sayonara.
Sure. You can find out everything that we're up to at alfavedic.com. That's ALFAVEDIC.com. We have our own private membership group in there. It's phenomenal private community, online community that you can join. And there you can meet others that are on this similar journey into truth and health and wellness. We've got the ability to connect in the real world there with a member map and DM each other. And we've got amazing, all sorts of different topics, and you can create your own groups and stuff. It's phenomenal. That's all at alfavedic.com. And of course, that's where you can get all of our products that comes from our farm, from Barre's 40 plus years of clinical experience as a trained practitioner. These are botanical based on alchemy, on the progression of alchemy to the new type of science that we embrace. So check that out. All of our amazing products are on there. And then we do a weekly show called Alpha Cast. It's good. We go live every Thursday at 10 a.m. and we entertain all sorts of guests from all different places and backgrounds. And then Barre and I will do in-house chats about what's interesting us at the time. So you can check that out. You can find all that at alfavedic.com. We do have a great Telegram channel too, if you want to join us there. But really, we're all about moving into the private. So please join us there on our website.
Okay. It's all linked in the show. Thank you so much, Mike and Barre, for being here, for doing what you do. You know, the conversation went in so many fun ways. I didn't even look at my notes. I'm like, forget about that. I want to talk about what's present. Now, the big question is, how do I get my videographer to the farm in NorCal for a behind the scenes understanding of the conscious spiritual alchemy that happens so we can forest bathe?
Let's do it. We had the Ikes actually shoot a documentary on us, David Icke and Jamie and Gareth, that's on the Iconic platform called Magical Land.
Amazing.
And that was done though in like 2021-ish, right, Bear? I mean, we've really, yeah.
We could use an update actually, so you're welcome anytime. If you want to come out here, we can take care of you. You can reconnect with NorCal. And yeah, our farm has really evolved. This is the fourth off-grid farm that my wife and myself have developed. And we're about midstream, but it's way more developed than when the Ikes were out here doing their filming. So yeah, we're due for an update. Love to see you out here.
All right.
Bring your swimming trunks because we got great swimming holes and all sorts of good stuff happening here.
I remember the Eel River in Garberville. I used to swim that when I was a kid.
Eel River's great. Smith River is
the best.
Guys, what a pleasure. Y'all let us know if you want me to do that. I mean, if enough of you are like stoked on this, we'll make it happen. Sage and I will go out there and we'll film something special so we can give you a peek into understanding how you can take this wisdom of off-grid and permaculture and organic living and actually apply it to wherever you live. I think that'd be so realistic and practical and fun. Super cool.
One tag on that is literally the model of what we're doing. Is it's supposed to be something that's repeatable, that anybody can follow and do themselves and engage in commerce that way and have a healthy, elegant lifestyle. That's what we're all about.
Okay, y'all. Well, until we see you again on another conversation or even a mini documentary, from my heart to yours, I'm wishing you love and wellness. We'll talk with you guys soon.